So the last time, which is a month ago, because 2 weeks ago was Easter when I last spoke, we talked about the woman who came and interrupted a dinner. Remember her?
Yes.
She came in when Jesus had been invited to a Pharisee's home. There were a bunch of other Pharisee buddies there by the look of it. The reference in it. And this woman shows up and starts to cry behind him over his feet, gets his feet wet, wipes them with her hair, and then puts ointment on them. So, and I made a comment there. It's interesting. This was not deliberate. There's some deliberation, more deliberation where I'm going now, but in all the early Jesus encounters up to that last one, it was all men. But Jesus had a whole bunch of encounters with women. And they're super interesting to explore. There's surprises in there. Surprises for our notion of who Jesus is. And that's, as I've said multiple times, that's the point of this. So Jesus represents the Father. He's doing what the Father's doing. So what's he doing? Because if we watch him, we get to see what the Father's doing, what the Father's like, what his heart is like, how he speaks, how he interacts with people, how he responds. And this particular one we're going to do today is quite phenomenal. Couple just background points. What I mentioned last time. In Jesus' traveling company were women. He didn't call them his disciples. We have no evidence. He chose 12. And then the wider group of disciples, as far as we know, they were all men. Some very young men. We would call them adolescents, probably. We have no record that he chose women, but women traveled with him. They were part of the company. And they were there. In that sense, they provided for him, it says. Some of them were women of note. But in that sense, they were followers. They were followers of Jesus, just in the literal sense. They went where he went. That's a follower, right? So apart from that basic distinction, Jesus had male disciples, but male and female followers, in the literal sense. The only other thing that's really interesting, and we'll explore this in different encounters, Jesus appears to be gender blind. In terms of human interaction and ministry, didn't matter to him. Just like it didn't matter to him how much money a person had, what their status was, what their reputation was, what their education was. Irrelevant.
Yeah.
There were things that he wasn't indifferent to, like the state of the human heart, or the attitudes of religious leaders, those kinds of things. There he did distinguish, right? And a bunch of other things. But in terms of who people were per se, he did. I don't see preference on his part or preferential treatment in relation to men or women. Much as one as for the other. And in that sense, and this is the account we're going to look at today, is a case in which you see Jesus swimming against the current of his own time. He was not bound by how this is what women, he respected it in the culture, but he wasn't bound by it. It's an interesting distinction. We could talk about it, but let's just leave it there for now. The gospel record suggests that men were more forward towards him, which makes sense, but we're going to look at it in terms of the culture, it makes sense. But we're going to look at encounters where the women got really forward. Like the one we watched last time. It was interesting. I think of it in terms of a movie or a play. Woman comes in, interrupts. It's like, what's she doing? She shouldn't be doing that. This is a guys only club. They're talking about important things. She comes in and starts crying. So all to say, Jesus lived in a historical moment, right? He belonged in it, but he wasn't bound by it. There's ways he respected it, but he wasn't bound by it. So we're going to look today, familiar to many, we're going to do it in a certain fashion at the story of Jesus meeting with the woman at the well. That's in John 4. You will have seen that from the email that went out. It's a remarkable coming together of Jesus and this Samaritan woman. Years ago, I got interested in this whole thing of God encounters, and I wasn't looking at Jesus, funny enough. I started with Moses, because Moses had the great God encounter in the Old Testament. There's nothing else like it. Goes on for chapters where they're back and forth. God says this one, I don't know. Moses isn't so sure. It's a hilarious story. For me, one of these days I'll get it all together, but it's the start of a book called Moses Was a Canadian and Other Stories.
I knew it.
Yeah, started about a decade ago. There's other things I want, but I've done much of the Moses part because it's totally hilarious at how he dodges, swerves, tries to get out from underneath what God is saying. And then he tries to, and then finally he just says, "No, I can't do this." And God gets angry. Oh. Anyway, that's a whole other tale. But I got interested in God encounters, and that encounter of Moses and God is unique in the Old Testament for like just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for an extended time. So the story we're looking at today is the same thing for the New Testament. For Jesus. There's no other story that has this kind of dialogue means two, right? Die. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Bingo. And right off the top, it's like, so Jesus had that kind of conversation with a woman. And it gets more interesting in that because he had a conversation with a woman who was also a religious outcast. Really briefly, Samaritan. Okay, so Samaria was an area to the north of Judea, which represented the breakaway tribes, 10 tribes, who split after Solomon, after his death with his son. There was a great argument. They split. Samaria was the region, but it was also a city that was built. So it's like New York and New York. Okay, you got Samaria and Samaria. And the Samaritans, they were conquered by the Assyrians a half millennium before Jesus. Some of the Jews were taken off to Assyria, but what the Assyrian king did was send people from other places to live in Samaria. And what happened? Intermarried and interreligion. They ended up with this. Their basis was still the first 5 books of the Bible. They only recognized what's called the Pentateuch. They didn't recognize the prophetic books or anything like that. It was still their basis. There were some variations. Did a little exploring on this, and there's something called the Samaritan Pentateuch, which was news to me, which is another version. The basics are the same. But anyway, so they headed in a different religious direction. And then, of course, you have to understand that because they're separate from Judah, Jerusalem is the center of worship, and this becomes an issue in the conversation between Jesus and this woman. Jerusalem is the center of worship for the Jews, but the Samaritans, because they were at odds with the rest of the Jews, and were no longer really, they were like half Jews, intermixed and not faithful to the full truth. So they established their own place of worship, and it was on Mount Gerizim, and that's the mountain being referred to when we get there in this. It's like you've got Mount Zion in Jerusalem, the temple, and then you have Mount Gerizim in Samaria. So you've got rival, and then to make it more interesting, about a century before Jesus, the Jews destroyed the temple at Mount Gerizim. So Samaritans and Jews were not friends. Let's put it that way. And this passage opens by saying Jesus was going to go back to Galilee from the south in Judea. Frequently, Jews making that trek in either direction would go across to the east side of the Jordan, so they didn't have to go through Samaria. They didn't want to go through the lands of the unfaithful, right, or the half-faithful. But it says in this passage, and I'll read the first part of it here in a minute, that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Doesn't mean anyone was telling him to. There was something going on. His father had obviously given him a heads up. There's something going on in Samaria. You're going through Samaria. Now it's fascinating because when he commissioned his disciples and sent them out in the middle of his ministry, he said, don't go to Samaria. Don't go to any town of the Samaritans. But this time, he had to go to Samaria. Let me read the first part of that, and we'll get to the dialogue. So this is the start of chapter 4. Just going to read the opening for the setting. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John the Baptist, although in fact it was not Jesus which baptized, or who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. So he's headed from the south to the north, the Sea of Galilee. And then this verse 4, now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Fascinatingly, it's also right next to Mount Gerizim, much closer to Mount Gerizim than the city of Samaria is, which is a good distance to the north. They're right next to the place of Samaritan, the holy place for Samaritans worship. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, distance is around 60K maybe from Jerusalem. So it's a trick. Nothing if you're driving, but Jesus wasn't driving. Tired as he was from the journey, he sat down by the well. It was about noon. So that's the setting. And then the Samaritan woman shows up. So a woman, a Samaritan, Jesus is alone. She's come out. We're not quite sure why she's there at noon. Normally, you wouldn't go draw water in the middle of the day when it's hot. Make some guesses about that. There may be nothing in it, but now, let's go to the dialogue. So I need a Jesus and I need a Samaritan woman. And for present purposes, why don't we just respect Jesus, man, Samaritan woman? Any volunteers? Who wants to be Jesus? Do you want to be Jesus? No? I mean, you
Want to be like Jesus.
yeah, that's for today. Yeah, I mean, yeah, might be the closest you'll get in this life. Anyone? Neil? Okay, super. Who wants to be the Samaritan woman?
I can do that.
Shirley?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so, yeah, so Jesus' words there are the ones in italics. I think I have that right.
Yeah.
So Jesus opens this conversation, and the Samaritan woman's words there are in bold, Shirley, and I've taken out the verse numbers and the little he said, she said kind of stuff, right? It's just the dialogue. So what I'd like us to do, so again, Jesus is weary. He sat down by the well. This woman comes out with a jar to get water, and Jesus greets her with a question. Okay, so just however you best listen. We're just going to go through this. Okay? Thanks. Go ahead.
Will you give me a drink?
You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?
If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water.
Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and herds?
Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. but those who drink the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life.
Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water.
How about you go and call your husband and come back?
I have no husband.
You are right. When you say you have no husband, the fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true.
Sir, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem.
Woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth.
I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us.
I, the one speaking to you, I am he.
Big illumination there. And the scales.
All right, let's just pause there and take a moment. And what do you see? What happens when you encounter this encounter?
She was shocked. He read her mail. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Jesus coming with a word of knowledge about her life, which
He read her mail, but he wasn't judgmental in that. He didn't
Yeah.
say, you shouldn't be sitting next to me. He just listened, yeah, I'm just gonna tell you this. But
Yeah.
no cruelty or judgment.
It's interesting that she changes direction.
and he doesn't bring her back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was also filled with joy, I would think.
Yeah, that's so interesting to try to. There's so much. This is incredible. I started unpacking and I thought, I can't unpack this.
Pretty excited.
Yeah. Terry.
It's interesting. It comes right on the heels of chapter 3 where Jesus meets Nicodemus. Reverse situation. It's nighttime. He's the learned one.
Yep.
Now he's sitting in the daytime with
Yep.
this woman that he would be considered ignorant of God.
Yeah.
And it's this great encounter.
Yeah, and that's interesting you mentioned that, Terry, because the conversation in chapter 3 with Nicodemus, the religious leader, it's not really a conversation because he just doesn't get anything. She just sort of, and Jesus says to him, you're a leader of Israel and you don't get this? It's not a good look. But he doesn't do anything with the woman like that at all. In fact, he does the opposite. It's stunning.
Yeah.
Anything else? I jumped at you, caught your attention here.
I guess I'm touched by the humbleness of the woman. As she approaches the well and sees Jesus and responds to him, but it's not what you would expect.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's it. That's the truth. None of this is what you expect. Jesus is behaving in a whole new way toward a woman who's in Samaria, who's offering and untouchable, probably an outcast in her own society, and yet God
Right.
reaches down to her.
Yeah, thanks for that, PJ. She's not only an outcast to Jews, but she's an outcast in her own society because of her marital history. Right? 2 or maybe 3 marriages it wasn't normal, but It's like, but 5? It's like something. And we can speculate about that. And I have things here which are, that's more than speculation, but yeah.
So it struck me that she's had 5 husbands, and yet she also has some knowledge that the Messiah is coming.
Right.
So she's not an unlearned woman.
Right. She does the best she can with the info she has.
Yeah.
And Jesus sort of goes with her, but it's a classic Jesus conversation where he feels no obligation to answer specifically or to stay exactly where she is. It's like the water. He just shifts. Yeah, there's water here, but how about living water? And then all of a sudden we're in another kind of conversation.
But how he started it,
Yeah.
he asks her,
Yeah,
which is, that's a no-no, really?
that's a no-no.
Yeah.
Right? Just speak to her. And then it's not in here, but there's a parenthetical statement in this when he asked, which she responds, says, what are you doing talking to me?
Yeah.
A Jewish man speaking to a Samaritan woman. Because Samaritans were considered unclean
Yeah.
to the Jews, and her vessel for drawing water would have been considered unclean and would have made Jesus unclean. And we've seen already before with the leper, Jesus wasn't very worried about being unclean by the standards of his time. He was the cleansing, clearly, but it just didn't.
Yeah.
That didn't bother him. So yeah, he's crossing those lines. So okay, so the dialogue is in 6 pairs. Jesus opens it, as Neil says, with a question and request. He's asking something of her. She comes back with a question. Then they go back and forth 6 times, and Jesus, of course, has the final word, number 7. Or no,
42.
Okay.
right? It's I am he. So we don't have a lot of time, and there's, as I say, so much here. So some summary stuff, okay? So strikes me that any meaningful conversation, we've all had different types of conversations. Some of them are like the Nicodemus conversation where Nicodemus can't really, it's not as though Jesus won't let him get a word in, but Nicodemus doesn't know what to say. He's sort of off in left field somewhere, and Jesus provided some basics for him. But it's not the case here. This is a meaningful conversation. What does that mean? It means it's back and forth. That's precisely what's going on here. They each give each other space, and a real conversation like that involves curiosity. It also involves willingness to entrust oneself to someone else. It's not a real conversation. There's a dance going on here, but it's a real dance rather than, oh, let's dance our way out of the conversation. Right? Or it's not about scoring points. Jesus isn't trying to trump her because he knows more than she does. That's not the goal. Going back to the conversation I referred to of God and Moses, one of the things that happens, and it's just overwhelmingly powerful, is how much Jesus gives away of himself. He actually never told another person until his trial that we referred to 2 weeks ago when asked by Pilate and the high priest that he was the Christ. Peter answered that to a question. Jesus said, don't tell anybody. But Jesus never revealed himself in that way to another person. And here, he reveals himself as the Christ or Messiah to a Samaritan woman.
Yeah.
It's wild. And it's the culmination of other revelations along the way. We can't talk about it now, maybe in some other context. He gives her keys to worship. But as far as I know, he hasn't given to anybody else. There's a pattern in here. It's like, what? He trusted her with things that were profound about the Father's heart and about who he was. She, of course, doesn't entrust him with the knowledge that she's had 5 husbands, but she does She's truthful, and Jesus commends that clearly. You're quite right. You don't have a husband right now. But she doesn't back off at that point either. She doesn't try to make excuses. You could argue she's going a bit of a side run with her next statement. Our father said, here's where you worship compared to there's where you worship, rather than going to her 5 previous husbands. Jesus isn't really interested in her 5 previous husbands either. He never comes back to her. He doesn't try to make sense of it.
I was just thinking, when you confront somebody, you want to defend. We get defensive. She did not get defensive.
No.
And say, well, he left, he did this, she did that.
Yeah.
He just said, whoa, you're a prophet.
Yeah.
It must have been the way that he said it, because he was Jesus and he
Yeah.
was so accepting, right?
Yeah.
Because anyone else, as you say, you would immediately get
Yeah.
your back up.
She didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just,
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. It's a real conversation.
Yeah.
Not defensive. It's an exploration. No one, at least the woman doesn't know where it's going. And I think Jesus, listening to the Father, he's there for a purpose. He knows it's for the woman. So just a comment on the 5 husbands. Usually, that's taken as, well, she's an immoral woman, adulterous, promiscuous.
Yeah.
Okay. However, 5 husbands suggest this woman is a very attractive woman.
Mhm.
But something about her or the situation doesn't work. And if you go back in the law, I've got all the text here. I won't take the time to read it. It's from Deuteronomy 24, if I recall. Men could pronounce divorce.
Wow.
Now, it says if they find something indecent in the woman, but it also says if the woman displeases him. So this woman, it sounds like, it's possible she walked out, but it's more likely that husband after husband said, enough already, you're out. And that's all they had to do. And the stipulation in the law is she just couldn't go back to her previous husband. That's why we know this. It's like if the second husband throws her out, the first one can't take her back.
Mhm.
That's not okay.
I'm just going to say she has no children.
That, I think
And so she's barren.
that's probably the
And
key
that
thing.
might have been.
Yeah. Once they found out she couldn't have kids,
That's good, Deb.
because in that culture, children were everything.
Could it not also have been that one of her husbands died and a brother took on her as
There's that
a
too.
wife
Yeah.
and then bore no children? So it's like,
Yep.
possible. I've already lost a brother, can't carry on the family line through them, so I've got to carry on the family line. You can't have kids, so you're toast.
Could be that too. But yeah, I suspect she's probably infertile. And because of that in the culture. And now she's got a man, hasn't married her. It's okay with the situation.
She's given up.
It's like, she's a straight shooter from the top, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't say, I've had 5 husbands. She just says, I don't have a husband. She's honest.
It struck me that Jesus possibly didn't have a lot of time, so he got right to the point. And that trust of exposing who he was made it all the more believable for her. Like it's like there was no argument from her. There was no real questions from her about what he was saying. She just accepted it as the truth.
True, though she had questions about the water. Right? Like that one. So first, I mean, when you read that, it was hilarious. A number of things in this were hilarious for me. No one is, sorry, how are you going to get the water, guy? You got nothing. Are you going to swim down there? The well, by the way, it was discovered some decades ago. It was over 100 feet deep.
whoa.
That's a long way to try to haul something if you don't have some way to get it out. Terry?
Two things.
Yeah.
That in their culture, it strikes me like, where's the shame?
Yeah.
In an honor shame culture, like, you don't see Jesus appealing to any of that.
No.
She doesn't seem to reflect that. She seems to be caught up with Jesus, like there's something else going on. She bypasses it all.
That's right. She's some kind of woman. She's presumably experienced lots of shame, but in some fashions, like, my life is what it is.
Yeah.
If we follow what Debbie said, I can't have kids. I can't change that.
She's resigned.
And people can shame me all they want, but it's out of my power.
She's experienced a lot of rejection.
Oh.
I think she has a very tough exterior that have to go through all of that stuff. And what struck me at the very beginning of the story is that she recognized that she's a Jew. So how would she do that, right? Like, she's in Samaria, and he comes out of nowhere and he's sitting. She just assumes,
Yes.
or she
Somehow.
knows something's triggered that you're a Jew.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure what that was.
Knows.
He was sitting there at the wrong time of day himself. Why did he be sitting outside? He was tired. The disciples had gone into town to find food. And in terms of the time constraint, I think he wanted this conversation to happen without the disciples around.
Yeah.
Right? He respected, even though that was wrong, he shouldn't have been alone with a woman in public like that. Jewish religious leaders didn't have those kinds of conversations in public
Yeah.
with women. So she's unsure how he's going to get the water, and then she wonders about the water. There's all kinds of things. Again, all we're doing is just sort of getting some things that jump, which are incredible. But this water Jesus talks about, the word used for a spring of water welling up within you that he's offering, the word for spring is the same as well that he sat at in verse 6. So in other words, I'm sitting on a well. The water I'm going to give you is going to be a well within you.
Yeah. It's pretty deep.
And welling up is the English translation, but it could gushing up or leaping up, springing up, I think is the NIV, springing up to eternal life. Okay, a couple more highlights. Talked about her background, and the reference, if you want to look for it in Deuteronomy, right at the beginning of chapter 24, about marriage and divorce. That could apply in this case. So again, I emphasize Jesus wasn't interested in that. He could have gone there. He did not. He wasn't worried about her failed marriages. Instead, he gives her a mini message on worship.
Yeah.
Just wild. So and a message which I'm not aware that he gave anybody else. And it's like right in the heart. Right in the heart. No, it's not this mountain or that mountain. And he says, the time is coming, and now is.
Yeah.
When those who worship the Father will worship in spirit and truth, not there or here.
He's breaking barriers.
100%.
So one way of reading this is that those words, the woman kind of throws in the towel. It's like so much stuff has been coming at her, right? She's done really well in terms of this back and forth, her questions and so on. And so she says, well, we know Messiah is going to come and he'll sort it all out for us. That's one way of reading it, but I see it funny. It's like, I give up. Let Messiah do it.
And you go,
And then,
he's here.
Jesus answers, the one talking with you is he. Now, just the postscript. It's, I say, we just touched on some key things in this, but then, of course, she goes back. The disciples come and urge him to eat. He says he's already eaten. And I go, what? And, of course, they don't understand him. If you don't know the passage, read it. And he says, basically, I've been doing what my Father's doing, and that's my food.
Yeah.
That's my sustenance. And then she comes, so she goes into town. This one I love. She says, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. And I'm thinking, the people are going, I want to hear this one.
I don't want to eat this.
This would be a movie. And it would be very carefully rated. Anyway, right? I mean, what a thing to say when you got a reputation like this woman in town. Come and see a man who's told me everything. But
You're happy about that?
Yeah.
And she's the best person to actually go into town and say that.
Yeah.
that's right. And then you get two groups of people. One group basically believes her. And then and they want to see Jesus. Another group isn't sure, but they want to see Jesus too because they're not sure. And then it says they go and see Jesus and they beg him to stay with them So he stays there for 2 days
Yeah.
in this town in Samaria. And it says a whole bunch more believe in him. And there were those who believed because of the woman's word, and they say, now we believe because we too have heard. And what's incredible to me is there's no evidence. It's possible. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but they say because of the word. Did he have words of knowledge for other people? Maybe. But whatever, I mean, John, this is so often for me, it's like, I know this is ironic, but it's the great tease. 2 days with the Samaritans, you don't tell us what he said, even anything? Even a mini sermon or one word of knowledge? Nothing? It's just how scripture works. So, all right, when we get to heaven, we'll find out.
Yep.
I'm going to ask.
Yep.
I want to know what happened in that town. And, but no evidence of miracles. There may have been healings, probably, maybe, I don't know. All it says is because of the word that he spoke, they believed. Wow. That's all.
Could it be that the woman didn't just shut that out, but she actually was active in the community for 2 days?
She's going around
He comes see the
with the disciples, yeah. So we can stop there. I mean, let's say we just sort of dived into the pool. Dove, thank you. And there's Jesus having a conversation he wasn't supposed to be having by the terms of the culture and religion of his own time. And it's in that conversation that he gives away incredible things about himself, about the Father, and creates a whole town of believers, or at least a town largely of believers by the sounds of it. Oh my, let's pray. Not that we have to pray now, but God's good. Father, I thank you for the revelation that comes through the word that you've left with us. We have I have lots of questions. I want to know what went on in that town. I'd love to see the interactions, Jesus, that you had with those other people. And how that was all set up by the conversation you had with the woman and how she responded to the conversation and what she said about it. But you've given us what we have as a picture of your heart. It reaches out to the outcast, to the stranger, to the one who's not supposed to be included. Jesus, you not only included her, but you gave things to her that were precious, precious pieces of heaven meant for earth. So we bless your incredible goodness, your kindness, your compassion, your wisdom, your knowledge, your insight. Yeah. Amen.
Mhm.